Okay, so this is a topic that I want to be really careful with, because what I do not want to do is dismiss women's very real fear. So first, my credentials. I am a woman. I have been lightly stalked. I have been sexually assaulted on multiple occasions. I have been penetrated without consent on one occasion, and I've been in a relationship where consent was coerced on multiple occasions. I have also been blocked into a room, physically restrained, and then choked by a man with police involvement. I want to clarify all that at the top because I want to make sure that you know that I'm not saying that the fear of men is silly or without reason. I understand that the fear that women feel around men is not without justification, and it is a fear that I feel myself. My heart rate jumps when I am walking alone at night and I notice that there is a man behind me. I want to make this video because the man versus bear talking point strikes me as a perfect encapsulation of how the way we talk about our fear of men harms our understanding of gender as a whole. So, man versus bear. An article on USA Today cites the video that sparked this conversation as being from Screenshot HQ, in which a street interviewer asks women whether they would rather encounter a man in the woods or a bear. 6 out of the 7 shown in the video chose the bear. However, the description of that video indicates that the question was already in circulation when the video was made. And with the nature of virality on TikTok, it is difficult for me to establish where it all began. What this means for my purposes is that there is no identifiable original. The discourse is dispersed across multiple interpretations, with threads of argument spooling out in all directions. It's important, then, for us to establish the argument that we are actually having. There are 2 types of engagements with the man versus bear argument that I want to talk about. The first is the statistical engagement, where someone points to the relatively higher number of assaults and sexual assaults perpetrated by men against women as opposed to the number of bear attacks, and argues that this validates women in choosing the bear. The second is the awareness engagement, where the question of man versus bear is framed as a thought experiment to get people thinking and talking about women's safety. I am extremely sympathetic to this argument. However, I think that it is this argument that poses the danger, because in combination with the misinterpreted statistics, it presents a vision of gender that harms both men and women. Let's get into it. 1. The statistical engagement. Personally, very few things will frustrate me more than the misuse of statistics, whether willfully misinterpreted or by way of misunderstanding. With the question of man versus bear, where I think people are going wrong is that the statistics relating to violence perpetrated by men against women, they are overwhelmingly occurring between people who know each other. According to the Rape, Abuse and Incest National Network, 2 out of 10 instances of rape are committed by strangers, which is not an insignificant number, but it pales in comparison to the 8 out of 10 that are committed by people you know. So, in order to use those statistics in order to make a point about the relative safety of women, we actually need to rephrase the question. Would you rather encounter a bear in the woods or be left alone with that weird guy from work? Would you rather a bear in the woods or being trapped at home with your abusive partner? I can't back this up because I'm not a statistician, and I'm not willing to become a statistician in order to trawl the data and find the evidence for this. But I suspect that the amount of danger in the case of encountering either a bear or a man in the woods is pretty negligible, barring perhaps that the bear is a mama bear who is looking after her cubs. 2. The awareness engagement. The tricky thing is that I agree with this argument in principle. There is a large percentage of women who feel afraid when they are around men. That is real, and that is a problem, and that is worth talking about. Where I think we're going wrong in this discussion is that a lot of people seem to be coming to the conclusion that this is a problem that men need to solve. If they don't like being considered as more dangerous than a bear, then they should stop being so scary. Listen. What I am going to say is going to sound to some people like I am dismissing the very real danger that some men do pose to women. That's not what I am trying to do. I remind you that I would feel afraid if I encountered a man in the woods, just as I would feel afraid if I encountered a bear in the woods. But there is a difference between saying I feel afraid of men and men are dangerous. I would really caution you to distinguish between the two and be mindful of which one you are saying. 3. Why this matters. Okay, so I said that I think that the man versus bear question is a handy encapsulation of the problems with the way that we talk about gender. That's because I think it reveals a quiet core belief that can come along, uninvited but still very much present, with the fear of men. Men are dangerous. You might not immediately notice, but the belief that men are dangerous ultimately agrees with the logic of toxic masculinity. It conceptualizes men as aggressive, hypersexual, prone to violence. It follows the same logic as boys will be boys, by implying that there is something in the fundamental nature of men that poses an inherent risk to women. We cannot attempt to dismantle toxic masculinity in the one breath and then allow our fear to reinforce it in the other. I'm not arguing that we should consider how men feel about it either, although I think that that is something worth thinking about. I think often about what it would do to me to be spoken about and treated as inherently dangerous. That's not something that I'm personally willing to do to any of the men in my life under any circumstances, even under the banner of women's safety. Faulty core beliefs can also take us to places we do not want to go. I'd point out to anyone claiming that this is a harmless discussion of women's safety that there are two fundamental building blocks to TERF ideology. The first is that trans women are men, and the second is that men are dangerous. You can see this in all TERF rhetoric. You can see it in their calls to keep women safe by keeping trans women out of women's spaces. TERF ideology started from a vague sense of unease around trans women, which itself has roots in a vague sense of unease around men. It then escalated to genocidal rhetoric in the form of Kelly J. Keane, also known as Posey Parker.
This is not playtime. This is end of bloody game time.
Which helped anti-trans sentiment escalate to genocidal rhetoric outside of explicitly TERF spaces.
Transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology.
I'm not making a slippery slope argument with that. It's just a handy example of the way that beliefs create actions and actions have consequences. It's well worth taking the time to think through where your beliefs are liable to lead you. It is okay to feel afraid, but we should always be skeptical of any belief that is formed out of fear. Now I can already hear the thousands of comments rolling in saying, "But what about you, surprisingly sincere? What would you pick? Would you pick the man or would you pick the bear?" The answer is that I would pick the bear because I want to scritch him behind the ears. Okay, goodbye.